This podcast is brought to you by Datamics. There are nearly 100 data providers in your DSP, but only Datamics can enable marketers to target audiences in cookieless environments with scale and accuracy. Discover how to reach inventory that your competitors are missing. Learn more about our game-changing technology at datonics.com/cookieless. That's datonics.com/cookieless. Welcome to the Marketecture podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm dialing in from sunny Las Vegas at CES. I am joined here by my always fun co-host, Eric Franchi. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well. I might be doing better than you. I stayed back.
Yeah, you avoided CES. How's that possible? You become an investor and you no longer have to stay out late at the Chandelier Bar?
Thankfully, I've got representation with Joe. Hopefully, you ran into him.
I didn't see Joe. There were sightings of Joe. People would say, "Oh, did you see Joe? I saw Joe. He was hanging out," but I didn't actually see him. You spend most of your time here basically meeting with people who live in New York or the New York area, so it's pretty silly.
Right. Ben, and I get, so actually, that's an interesting way to start the conversation. Was it productive? What did you do?
Yeah, I had a very unstructured CES. I had very few meetings. I had really no reason to be here. I'm not selling anything. Maybe I could sell a couple of ads on Marketecture podcast, but I'm not really selling anything. So it was strange. I just wandered around. I would meet someone I knew every 5 minutes, I'd say, and have like an impromptu meeting, catch up. What are you doing? So that was kind of fun. Like I said, most of these people live in the New York area. I have a hit rate of maybe 60% of the conversations that I have with people are people who I could actually remember their names and who they are. The other 40%, I had meaningful conversations with what you might call an anonymous browser. So someone who clearly knew who I was, but for whom I was able to maybe narrow it down. I think they're in the video business, maybe in sales, but no clue who they actually are. So if you were one of those people and I gave you a look like, "Hey man, nice to see you. How are things?" Feel free to follow up on LinkedIn. I will be happy to respond. So last night, our friend of the pod, AdTech God, threw a happy hour. And now, he's an anonymous person. People don't know who he is. So he threw a happy hour, but he's not allowed to attend. Or maybe he did attend. Nobody knows. But what he did was he hired an Elvis impersonator who had a big sign that said, "Ask me if I'm AdTech God," which was, kind of funny. I put a picture of that on Twitter. One of the stranger things is that this Elvis impersonator, I don't think he knew this, was approximately 7 feet tall. So there was a giant Elvis impersonator. I'm not sure if that was part of the gig or if that was just a coincidence. But anyway, that was fun.
So you don't know if AdTech God was there or not, huh?
Well, I do. I am the key to the castle, but
Got it. So what was, give me the vibe check. What were people talking about? What were the big topics?
Yeah, I think people are pretty enthusiastic going into 2024. Business is good. 2023 wasn't fantastic for a lot of folks in the media side of things, but it wasn't a disaster. And so looking at 2024, people are raring to go. Political year, anticipation that the ad business will be relatively strong. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty in the market around Google and around a lot of other things, but it's a lot of business as usual. I think that's just the natural reaction of people, when they when it's not obvious things are going to change. And I think, in a sense, people are underestimating the amount of change that's about to happen, or they're not reacting strongly enough to it. So that was my reaction to their complacency was, wow, you're not really talking about AI, and you're not really talking about cookie deletion in the sandbox in the way I would talk about it if I was an operator today, which is, borderline panic.
Yeah, that makes sense. You had as far as ad tech tweets go, a semi-viral tweet when you first got there, which was, it was like the Drake meme where, IP address is out, household ID is in. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I had someone pitch me this on, at the Aria lobby bar. I was talking about Sandbox. I'm kind of a broken record. I want to talk to everyone about Sandbox. No one wants to talk to me about Sandbox. And so I was talking about Sandbox, and the reaction was, well, we use household ID, so it won't affect us. And I obviously had a follow-up question, which is, what exactly is a household ID? And hamana.
Right.
Yeah, signals from the browser. We consistently see the users. I'm like, you're talking about an IP address. And lo and behold, yes, you're talking about an IP address. And I think it's funny because it's true that the entire ad tech ecosystem outside of Google is basically going to try to steamroll right through cookie deletion and use IP addresses. And that is a very dangerous pattern because IP addresses, first of all, have questionable regulatory approval or regulatory acceptance. And secondly, maybe going away on a slightly longer time frame than cookies. And this brings up kind of my other point that I referenced a moment ago, which is that people are just in absolute denial or lack of preparedness about the Chrome sandbox and about the direct deletion of cookies. And what I would speak to folks who are, maybe a little bit more on the sales side, but still executives about the sandbox, the answer was almost entirely like, I barely looked into it. Oh yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering how my data will work. Well, the answer is just, well, your data won't work. And so I'm kind of a little bit surprised.
So you think that there's a potential, shit going to hit the fan moment come end of year when the percentages really start adding up?
It may. And I think that the number of companies that will embrace the way Google sees the world as moving to these new browser-based technologies is very low. I think that there'll be some, but it's not going to be most. People are going to try to skate through with the mixture of hashed emails, UID2, IP address, and whatever hook and crook they can. That seems to be the pattern that's happening.
Paul Bannister, who's been on the pod before, he had another tweet that went, I think, deservedly, pretty viral, which was, week one, after 1% of cookies going away, here's what we're seeing. And his takeaway was, it's not that disastrous, right, with a lot of a lot of qualifiers.
He said that there was a 30% RPM reduction, revenue per page or revenue per 1,000, a reduction, and that was less than expected vis-a-vis previous experiments with Safari that are closer to 60%. And I think that's interesting, but it's really a moving target because it's a marketplace. So if you go from 1% to 100%, the behavior of the buyers will change, and it's very unclear how it will all shake out. There probably are many buyers who, in their DSP, just say Chrome only, and so you're still getting Chrome even if you don't have a cookie. And there's a lot of other factors. So it's an interesting first data point. It's great that Paul publishes what he's finding because he's one of the few people who's really engaging on this topic. But I think it's not really something definitive or something we can count on at this time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you're right. It's like, it's not 60, it's not 70, but 30 on a big, open web ad business. If it's 30% on $100 million, something like that, that's still, really bad. That's
it's
still,
really bad.
you're making real changes.
Yeah, it's really bad. 30 would be really bad. I think also another sub point he made that I think is interesting that folds into the IP address conversation is that Google's demand, meaning the ad exchange demand going to the publisher, was worse affected than pre-bid demands from other SSPs. And this is probably because the other SSPs are more likely to be using other signals like IP address, hashed email, probabilistic IDs like ID5, et cetera. Whereas Google playing it very conservatively on the legal and regulatory side and isn't willing to do anything besides what's allowed strictly in their browser implementation.
Right. What were the other topics that people were talking about? So streaming CTV, retail media, AI. What's so everybody talking about?
You got the poker hand there. I think that streaming TV is where everyone's making money and everyone's excited about it. And there's more and more companies starting, more innovation going on there. Everyone wants a piece of that pie. I think that, and this goes to news of the week, that there was a lot of whispering and talking about VideoAmp and what happened there. So we're kind of bleeding into news of the week, but I'll bring it up, which was almost immediately after our year-end episode where we were trying to talk about the best companies, small and large. I raised my hand and said the best private large ad tech company was VideoAmp. And they had just done a big raise. And then not a week later, layoffs. Ross McRae, the CEO, is out. Josh Chazen, the head of measurement, out. And people are trying to figure out what happened there because VideoAmp is definitely on an interesting strategic course. They raised a lot of money. And there's a sort of a worry that this, sort of like the Ukraine war, which is like, it might take a lot longer and be a lot more expensive to take out Nielsen than they thought. So I think that, and what's going to be the secondary effects on other TV-oriented companies, that this audience war, the JIC, and everything that we've covered on the show before may be a very long, hard struggle that's very expensive.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And never want to make light of layoffs and everything like that, but I do think it's interesting that your pick was the first company to have a significant negative announcement weeks later. This may be this hopefully will not be the next like athlete on the cover of Madden or founder on the cover of Forbes.
Yeah, I don't want to be the Jim Cramer of ad tech. That is not my goal here.
Definitely not. Definitely not. What about retail media and AI? Anything interesting you discovered?
On AI, I think it reminds me a little bit of the cookie conversation, which is that everyone's aware of it, everyone's talking about it, but I don't think they're taking it seriously enough. And you're a big believer in AI, big advocate. Yeah. And I think AI is going to be extremely transformative to a lot of businesses, and not just as a feature, not just as a creative development feature or optimization feature. I think it could fundamentally change parts of our advertising stack. And I don't see that ambition. Maybe the startups are doing it and they're not the people, the establishment that I hang out with. But I'm hearing a lot of small bore conversations about AI. What are you hearing as an investor?
Yeah. It's like so like fascinating and maddening at the same time. I'm steeped in the opposite, right? Which is seed and pre-seed companies that are going for it and that are like deep into building the technology. And my sense, it's interesting, as a person that's, in New York, like watching the stream and looking at it, it's like a lot of conversations about what will be, a lot of conversations and pontificating, but not a lot of doing. One thing that happened yesterday was they released the GPT store. People have been developing GPTs now for some time. There's something like 3 million GPTs that have been built on top of OpenAI. So I spent a fair amount of my time, thanks to the lower volume of email and meetings with all you folks in Vegas, just hacking away on the GPT store and using the Canva GPT and using some of these other GPTs, because I think it's important to understand this stuff. Number one, as an investor, and then number two, to really get a sense for what you can replace, like to use, probably want of a better word, with some of this technology. And you've been saying a couple of times how you think that people don't appreciate just how disruptive this might be to technology stacks and the way people work. And to build Wise's point last week, like how many people are involved, like it's pretty wild. So I would recommend to everyone, to number one, just use ChatGPT, because it will be a clone of you that works better and faster. Use the free version, but spring for the $20 a month for the pro version and start working with some of these custom GPTs and start thinking about it from an ad tech context. And I think that's the best way to, I think, number one, be steeped in some of the reality. And then number two, you're probably going to have a leg up on your competitors, on even your coworkers, and understanding this stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I will add, there is a Marketecture GPT. We have not published it yet. So I have imported about 100 hours of transcripts into GPT for Marketecture. There is an AI on our website that's kind of bad because I used a different vendor. It didn't really work. We're looking to migrate that so that you'll be able to subscribe to the Marketecture GPT, and it's incredibly useful for ad tech and MarTech questions. And so I will, more to come on that. It's taking a little longer than I hope it would.
Exactly. I mean, with people trying to, understand things, imagine having Ari and all of the CEOs that we've interviewed over the course of the past year or so, just like literally a text away. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. Anyway.
So I saw Martin Sorrell speak at the Brand Innovators Summit. Brand Innovators puts on a really good show. It's the first one I've been to, and it was great. And Sir Martin talked a little bit about AI, and he didn't have a definitive sort of forecast there, but he brought up the key issue, which was that The procurement departments think in terms of bodies. You hire an agency and you pay them based on people, and suddenly AI may change that equation. And so that's a really tricky problem. It's a good problem to have. Like, you're basically creating efficiencies, but it's a tricky problem to have for agencies and their contracts and their customer expectations. He also dropped one nugget, which was that he felt that looking at the global agency world, he's very globally oriented. He spoke a lot about China and Indonesia and places like that. But he said that Europe is the ground zero effectively for AI, because Europe is the most difficult region for agencies because of languages and fragmentation, and customers will only work in certain countries and inefficiencies. So that was his sort of mini prediction, I think, was that AI will hit the European agencies.
That's fascinating. Shiv had a tweet, something along the lines of chat DSP, even ahead of this announcement. And I know it was a throwaway, but I really think that there's an idea of bringing products that are at parity to market with massively reduced cost structures, using AI, using small teams, and just being able to compete on the virtue of price.
I think Shiv was onto something, even though he was kind of joking. But this is what I'm really thinking about, which is the number of PowerPoints I've seen from startups saying, we're going to use AI to automate trafficking, right? Automate the trafficking in DSPs or automate the optimization in DSPs. My immediate reaction is that that's a really small bore goal, right? Like, why does trafficking exist is a better question. Why do line items exist in a world of AI? Because the whole point of line items is to kind of differentiate along different breaks in your plan. And that should all be eliminated with AI. You really should be able to effectively just give the platform your objectives and get them in a transparent way. In the past, there was always this break, like either you had transparency of price and operations, or it was totally non-transparent. But there's an opportunity to find a world where the price is transparent, but the operations don't need to be. The computer just tells you what to buy, but you know what you're buying. You don't have to be in a blind ad network environment. And that's just one example, I think, of places where there could be a lot of innovation and some big changes to the way the standard sort of DSP console might look and act.
I agree. Before we get on to the news of the week, anything else from CES?
Yeah, I think that it's great to see everybody. It's a lot of the same people, some new people, some people, who have dropped out of our industry are now on to new things outside of ad tech. That's always fun. People, trying to try their hand at things that are more in the actual consumer electronics world. So that's kind of fun. I think it was really hopping, and it definitely our business is back. So so let's move on from CES and talk about the news of the week. We had a lot of news. I think last week was really light on news because I think everyone came back from the holidays, and now we're full on. So let's get to it. Let's see. So you have your new Kubian. So we joke that I'm like tracking Kubian like the white whale, and now Eric, you're obsessed with the Arena Group. So we had Andrew Kraft on from the Arena Group about 2-3 weeks ago, and it seems like the ball keeps rolling downhill. Why don't you tell us what's going on with the Arena Group?
Yeah, a lot of folks talked about that episode. I think people love Andrew, and I wasn't really familiar with the Arena Group or what had happened to date. But for some reason, the news just keeps coming, and perhaps just because I'm not at CES, I've been able to sort of develop this timeline. So in December, the 5-Hour Energy guy, last name is Bargava, hates PowerPoints. He acquires a stake in Arena Group. There's the AI controversy. He cleans out, Andrew's out, Ross is out, and he becomes the interim CEO. In early January, so I guess after the Andrew episode, Jim Heckman, who folks might remember, he was always in the media ecosystem. He was a Yahoo exec when Ross Levinson was there. He teams up with Brock Pierce, who was a child actor. He was in The Mighty Ducks and, became, I think, a crypto billionaire. They teamed up to acquire the majority of the Arena Group via just buying stock because it's a public company. Jim is the former CEO, I think, of Arena Group. So I think he's got a real desire to get this thing back. 2 days later, the 5 Hour Energy guy steps down as the CEO. And there's talk of like the Arena Group missed a key licensing deal payment to Authentic Brands, who owns Sports Illustrated, and an interest payment to a lender involved in the deal. So very quickly, this person that, went in, leaned house, had the leadership, is a couple of weeks later out completely. And there could be like an entire shuffling of the chessboard. The thing that's interesting, I think, that I didn't really fully appreciate is Authentic Brands owns Sports Illustrated.
Okay,
Arena
it's like
it's
a license to Arena.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they don't have much in terms of IP, just this 10-year licensing deal. So I don't know what's going to happen, but all of a sudden now I'm
You're
like,
on it.
This is like Real Housewives for me.
No. I mean, so Jim Heckman is currently the CEO, or is there no CEO?
No. I don't think there's a CEO. I think there might be another acting CEO.
Okay.
This is where things might have shifted. They're trying to buy a controlling stake through just like public company stock purchases. Him and Brock.
And why is the Brock child actor thing has me thrown off a little bit? It's just random that he's a child actor. It has nothing to do with the story.
So far, it seems to be random. Yeah, seems to be like a good, capable capital partner.
All right, that's fascinating. Kind of. Keep on it. Related. We didn't talk about. It's not going to be a good story, but I can't remember the name of the company.
Oh, the Messenger.
The Messenger. Thank you. Yeah, we didn't talk about it. Mike and I had a separate podcast about that because the Messenger, I'm going to just kind of summarize, was this idea that you can create a media company that would be ad supported and would be middle of the road and cover the news the right way, which is like the most naive possible idea in 2023 that you could imagine. And lo and behold, they did a speed run through all the failing media strategies and are left currently effectively close to being out of money. And there's a PowerPoint going around of them trying to raise money, claiming that they're going to generate something like $40 million in ad revenue in 2024 off a base of like none. And it's kind of a fascinating tale of hubris because it's effectively making all the media mistakes everyone learned over the last 10 years, but doing it very quickly. And they're about to pivot to video, of course.
That's where the $40 million comes from.
Exactly. I don't have any intelligent feedback on this. It's kind of a salacious, interesting story. Speaking of salacious, interesting story. Okay, this is my big one. This is my fun one. So Alfonso and LG. So I have a lot of history here because Alfonso was one of the largest beeswax customers when they sold to LG. So I know the principles pretty well. So
one of the first too, right? One of the first customers?
Yeah, they were early customer, very strong customer. They did really strong. I would speak to the CEO, Raju and Ashish, the two founders. I would talk to them all the time. So let's put on our journalist hat for a moment. I've done no original reporting here. I have read a really good Ad Exchanger article. You should read the Ad Exchanger article. It is incredibly well reported. It has great details and quotes from the case. Last night, I was at the LG party. So after LG did this thing to my friends at Alfonso and lost this court case, I decided to eat some of their sushi. It was delicious. Thank you, LG, for having me at your party. I mentioned to the CMO of LG Ads, Tony Marlowe, hey, man, too bad about the lawsuit, which we'll talk about in a moment. And he said, oh, you're not going to cover that on the podcast, are you? And I was like, hell yeah, I am. And so Tony said to me, we're a couple drinks in, eating our sushi. Tony says, let me get back to you. He runs out, talks to his PR people, comes back to me and says, we really want to, set the record straight about this. But it was late at night. And he's like, I'm not going to do it here at the party. So I said, okay, well, call me tomorrow, like meaning today while we're recording this. So it is very possible that Tony will, at some point between now and when we publish this, give me his point of view, in which case I will append it at the end of this podcast. But as of this morning, we have not heard from LG. Okay, here's the story. That was a very long introduction because journalism is pedantic. That's the nature of journalism. Alfonso was an independent ad tech company, very similar to Samba TV, who they sued, by the way. So Samba and Alfonso were rivals. They basically use ACR to figure out what you're watching on TV and then sell the data or run an ad network. Great. They sold 50.1% of their business to LG. And as part of that, really, that was the formation of LG Ads. And the deal was really complicated and allowed the Alfonso shareholders to get certain payments and also to potentially spin out the company or have the other 49% get acquired by LG at certain pricing. So it was a complicated deal, but it was sort of independently operating within LG. There was a lot of conflict between the Alphonso founders and the LG people. LG is a Korean company, conservative. The Alphonso founders are a little bit wild men. I'm not going to comment on that. What then happens?
That's where you need to go to the article in Ad Exchanger because
there's some very funny emails.
Emails are written in ink, my friends, and they see the light of day during times like this.
So basically, about a year ago, I think we covered this on the pod. The founders of Alphonso were kicked out, summarily removed from LG. A lot of bad feelings. All right, no explanation why they were just removed. Lawsuit ensues. Lawsuit was settled. The judge found in favor of the Alphonso guys, and this is what the article's about. And in the lawsuit, the details are pretty salacious in that the lawsuit has documents where the executives of LG, including the general counsel of LG, were planning a very specific, and the word coup is used, a very specific coup against the Alphonso founders to remove them, effectively to kick them off the board, to put in their own CEO, then kick the remaining people off the board so that LG would get total control of Alphonso, and then they would effectively lowball the Alphonso founders for the remainder of their stock well below the value. And that was the allegation. The judge found in favor of the Alphonso people and gave the Alphonso investors recontrol over the board, effectively. So this is LG Ads, which now will be controlled by the founders of Alphonso, if that's confusing enough. And what happens next is potentially that Alphonso will have LG over a barrel to some extent, will get whatever payment they deserve, or it could potentially take control over it and spin it out. So fascinating and salacious, and makes every entrepreneur's blood boil to read these documents about how the LG people allegedly really screwed over the founders.
Yeah. I, again, recommend everybody read the article. Why would this happen? Well, allegedly the Alphonso business, which, was basically the formation of LG Ads. So the LG Ads business over the course of the past couple of years since the acquisition took off like a rocket ship. And I think it's again, don't quote me, this might be misinformation, but I think it's like a $500 million business. So the valuation on Alphonso is going to be way, way higher, both in terms of just, the size of the business and the growth rate and the fact that it's in CTV. So this is going to be interesting. But the founders, they left a year ago. So, again, to your point, do they take control and run this thing again is I think a real question. Like, I would assume they've moved on in lots of ways. Do they want to do this again?
Yeah, I know for a fact, I don't think I'm disclosing anything, the founders have a new startup, unrelated. They're busy. I don't know what they want to do. And one other data point is they sold that 50.1% for $80 million. So that gives you a sense.
So it's a 160
market value for the whole company when it was sold like 2 years ago. So the reason why, the one question that came up for me is why would they do this weird, complicated deal? And I think, and Eric, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but the 50.1 threshold is the threshold at which you can declare the revenue as being above the line as a company. So if you want to claim the revenue from a minority investment or a partial investment, it has to be over 50.
That's my impression as well.
Yeah. So LG wanted the revenue. They saw it growing. They wanted the ad group to show rising revenue, but the founders didn't want to sell out entirely. They thought there was a lot of upside. So that's why this complex structure probably existed. This is the must read of the week. You have to read the Ad Exchanger article about this. You can just Google, Alphonso and Ad Exchanger. You'll find it. If Tony gets back to me promptly, I will give you his side of the story. Otherwise, maybe we'll cover it next week. And thank you for the sushi, Tony. It was awesome. So let's move on.
Marketecture is in the middle of things. Wow. A year later, man. Oof.
So we talked about VideoAmp, which is new. There was breaking news just a minute ago. So I saw this tweet right before we joined to record this, which was Digiday has a new CEO. So Nick Fries has moved to chairman. David Amrani will be the new CEO. David was the COO. I've worked with David and Nick because we have a partnership with Marketecture. So congratulations to both of them. I don't have much other comment there, except that Nick's been doing this since 2008, quite a long way, and he's diversified. Digiday, there's fashion, has a bunch of other publications, so good for him. Dave Morgan also, I guess that's not in our show notes, but Dave Morgan also is no longer CEO. He is more operational role after many years running Simulmania as CEO. He probably will have more time to focus on his running or something along those lines, but he's still very involved. I think he kind of moved down to COO or something like that.
Or was it kicked upstairs to exec chair?
No, I think in the case of Dave, he's still going to be very involved. He's not a chair. But I don't have the details.
So just working on product.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Good for Dave. Congrats. It was another awesome episode.
All right. What do you want to talk about next? Amazon Video?
Yeah. So there was a piece that came out this week, that basically highlights that Amazon Video, which we talked about last week, in that, they're making it like fully ad supported unless you pay $2.99 a month, is also aggressively looking to bring CPMs to market that are far less than the competitive set. So according to this piece, which was in Insider Intelligence, so part of BI, they're planning on having basically a $30 CPM for CTV versus, just to give you some idea, Netflix and Disney going to market at $50. So they're going after it. They're really being aggressive. I think one of the things that was interesting that I saw in that piece was they said that there's a subscriber base for Prime Video of 290 million people globally, and I was like, that's huge, that's gigantic. And I thought that meant like the total Prime subscriber base, not just Prime Video. But in all the research that I did, like that seems to be the number for Prime Video, which is immense. But then if you look at Netflix, it might make sense because Netflix has 250 million subscribers, of which 225 or so, based on their recent announcement of 25 million advertising-based subs, were Netflix subscribers. So these are really big user bases, and this is why CTV is such an attractive space. It's just gigantic.
Yeah, it is, and it's getting bigger. I think the sports is another part because Amazon Prime having Thursday Night Football was a big boost to their subscriber base. If those economics work, you have to imagine they'll keep acquiring more sports, and that will generate more viewership, and it's a positive feedback loop. They also announced a big hire yesterday. So Amazon Video hired a guy named Jeremy Helfand to be the VP of advertising for Prime Video. He was formerly at Hulu and Disney. So that is another indication they're very serious about this whole thing. Here's my anecdote. I'll leave the guilty party unnamed, but I ran into a fellow who is a senior exec in Amazon's ad business on the product side. And he gave me the most cliched complaint ever, which was, we're trying to build this product and all these agencies, they have all these weird requirements around workflow and naming conventions and all this stuff. And I just laughed in his face and I said, you're building a walled garden and you're complaining that you have to reproduce all the stuff that all the real platforms built. I have zero sympathy for you. If you want, workflow organized agencies, let the trade desk bid on your inventory. It's very simple. But no, you want everyone to log into your system, you got to build every single stupid feature agencies want. So congratulations on your career decision.
Yeah, Jeremy Helfand is great. I've watched him from afar, and somewhat acquainted with him for many years now. He's been in video ad tech for about as long as it's been in existence. And then, so do Disney and Netflix start to respond accordingly and get aggressive on price? I don't see how they can't. Right? I think they have to.
Yeah, I think with Netflix, they came out at $65 through the Microsoft arrangement that was published figure. And I think it's pretty widely understood that was unrealistic. So I think they've been coming off of that. I think it's also an inventory question. I think probably Prime is going to have a lot more inventory than Netflix and Disney. So Disney maybe could keep charging more for the smaller footprint and sell out. There's also geography, probably. Some of Netflix is a very global company. So you have to have very different pricing in different parts of the world.
Very true.
So we knew this was coming, but it's the first time it's been in the press, which is, deep fakes for advertising. The New York Times reported a case of where Taylor Swift's voice was used to sell Le Creuset cookware, and she had nothing to do with that. And actually, Le Creuset had nothing to do with that. It was a total scam. I'm not sure this is newsworthy, except because we all knew it was coming, but it's the first instance of this popping up in the mainstream press, it's going to be really hard, really, really hard for platforms to prevent imagery and videos being used improperly. I mean, I know on my X feed, I still use X, Twitter. I'm sorry to call it X, so I guess they won that battle. On my X feed, the number of ads that use celebrities that shouldn't be is almost 100%.
Yeah, there's the new one, which is and perhaps I'm being targeted based on my own demographics of like a weight loss ad. Have you seen this? Where it's like celebrities that lost weight like in the 80s. They basically like put the before and after on that one. And it's, like Oprah and Drew Carey and all these people that, probably don't work with this, unknown startup who's hacking ads in the X feed. So it's absolutely a real problem. And I think as these tools just get easier to use and proliferate, it's impossible to scale. I think a QC team, using people versus AI, this is only going to become I think a bigger issue.
I mean, I don't really know how they're going to stop it. I mean, basically, the big platforms have always done some level of creative review, but it's difficult for them to get every single variation on the stuff.
Yeah, especially when you have millions of customers.
Yeah, millions of customers, sometimes uploading thousands of ads at a time. Times are hard. More opportunity, maybe.
Yeah. Were you very angry because it was Taylor Swift?
No, I bought a couple pans. I was upset about that, I'm a big Swiftie. I'm also a big Liquor Say. That's why it was actually my dream campaign.
Violated.
All right, more in the CTV business. So Philips is now joining their competitors as launching an ads business. As we talked about earlier, LG obviously has one, and Vizio has one, and Samsung has one. So Philips, I'm not really sure what Philips' market share is in the physical TV business, but they're jumping in, and more indication that if you have any grasp on a consumer's TV habits, you can monetize that in various ways.
Yeah, I think that's right. We're an investor in Telly, which is, it's the only hardware investment that we have within the fund. They were making a bunch of noise because they were experimenting with using AI for their unit. And it seems to be like there's a competition for, just the hardware itself, because that gives you the opportunity to, kind of own the ad experience. But I think Philips is probably down on the list in terms of just number of units sold globally.
Yeah, exactly. Yahoo has announced that they're allowing their advertisers on the DSP. I think it's on the DSP. It wasn't clear if it was on the DSP or owned and operated to do side-by-side tests of cookies versus new IDs. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They say that more than 90% of the same results can be achieved with effectively a line item running cookies versus a line item running some combination of their connected ID and other techniques they have in their tech platform. So I think we're going to see a lot more of these kind of announcements. This announcement, if you read between the lines, is effectively saying don't worry, we're going to be fine. Cookies are going away, but we have special sauce. Yahoo having the login data is their kind of bulwark against the cookie deletion. We just have to keep watching this space, I think.
I agree. I feel like we forget about Yahoo. This might be the first mention of Yahoo ever on the Marketecture podcast. It's no longer a public company, so it's unclear how big of a business it is. I mean, it's always been, these eMarketer or Insider Intelligence, like largest ad sellers, like it's always in the top 10. But I do wonder what the state of Yahoo's ad biz is, because again, I don't know what the actual monthly usage of their email, which I think is the basis of their ID, is versus like Google. But it's 200 million people. So there's a real asset there.
I don't know much about Yahoo's O&O business, which is I think the larger portion of their business. But I will say the Yahoo DSP was a pretty tough competitor in the U.S. Versus Beeswax when we're selling DSP services. I would say they're absolutely in the top 5 DSPs. If you think top 3 are obvious, which is Google, Amazon, Trade Desk. Next 2, probably Yahoo and Beeswax in terms of media spend. So it's a pretty substantial piece of the overall marketplace. Last story, Symbiosis raises $9 million. This is also an ad exchanger. So Symbiosis is a retail media play that allows retailers and brands to sort of do cooperative marketing. So they may share the expense of the ads to drive traffic to the retailers. Well, it's like co-op dollars. If you want to drive someone to a high margin product on your retailer, maybe the money has to be split somehow between the brand and the retailer. I think it's notable because John Updike, who was the founder of Hook Logic, is an investor, and Hook Logic is sort of the OG of retail media. Also, $9 million raise in this environment's a tough one. What are you thinking here, Eric?
Yeah, it was impressive. Seems to be a fairly complex product, and it's starting with search and social, which I think is interesting because from my impression, there's, less heat, there's less activity in search and social versus like programmatic display. So I think it's interesting. But the co-op stuff always tends to be fairly complex in practice in terms of splits, attribution, payments, everything like that. But yeah, to your point, Jonathan, he was day one retail media. So when he gets involved in something, it's interesting.
I also talked to Jonathan a couple of months ago, and one of his other big investments is like a butcher. Like he lives in Detroit, I think, and I may be mangling the story, but he invested in a meat purveyor in downtown Detroit that's like, very high end, and trying to have a bistro and stuff like that. So if you're hungry in Detroit, John will hook you up with a reservation. All right, so that's our show. I forgot one other thing, highlighted CES, which was I saw Mark Cuban speak at Brand Innovators, and that guy is so impressive and so amazing, and I am hoping he runs for office. I'm on the Mark Cuban train. I will go door to door with his pamphlets, trying to get him in whatever office he wants to run for.
Do you think he's gonna?
Yeah. I think he talks.
I mean, he's selling assets, right? He sold his interest in the Mavs. Like, I mean, again, yeah, I've heard that sports team valuations, have peaked. So perhaps he's like, kind of classic broadcast.com, selling at the right moment, doing it again with the sports team. But those are big boy moves that you make when you're up to something.
Yeah, I think he's definitely up to something. I think he spoke at this conference as a brand conference, and 90% of his content was political in nature. He gave his like closing remarks, which was like the best political speech I've ever heard about like the future of America is bright. Our children are bright. We have a great change in our society. We want the better for our children and for the world. It was like amazing. I don't think he's running this year. I think he's getting involved in politics this year. Mm-hmm. But either governor of Texas or president 2028, I'd be surprised if he doesn't do so.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm a big fan, so I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, I'd be really excited if he did that. So that's the show. It was a great time at CES. If I saw you and didn't know who you were, I'm sorry. It's just me. I still love you. It's not it's not you, it's me.
We're getting older.
Eric, you have to come out next year. We'll do this together. I didn't do any man on the street interviews. We'll have to do that if possible.
And I'm open to next year. I'm open to it.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.